Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review. Today we're going to be looking at a tiny little thing, and don't worry, I'll bring you in closer shortly to have a look. But this is an Opamp made by Burson Audio. Now an Opamp is one of the little chips that goes inside an amplifier, be it a portable one or certain desktop amplifiers. It goes inside there and it actually does the job of amplifying the sound. So it has a lot of impact over the quality of the sound that you're going to get. Burson have been kind enough to send me their V5i Opamp for review, and I can tell you it's a really impressive piece of kit. It's got a few challenges, one of which is the size, but if you've got an amp that you can fit it in, it's definitely worth a look at. So come on in and enjoy the review. So I've gone handheld for a moment here to show you what we're talking about today. This is the V5i. So it's as I said, an op-amp from Burson Audio. Traditionally, you might be familiar with seeing op-amps that look something more like this. Now this is the Muses 02. It's a very well-known and highly respected amplifier. Its brother, the Muses 01 over here, if it'll come into focus for us. And finally, the op-amp that I've been using for a long time and loving is the OPA 627 from Texas Instruments. You'll notice that there's a significant difference between all of these, and that is that we've got a surface mounted chip here in the OPA 627 compared to the more sort of simple plug and play version here. And again, depending on the amplifier that you've got will determine which sort of op amp you need. Looking back now at the V5i, you'll notice that it's got the same 8-pin, what I refer to as a plug and play. It's a very simple, just drop-in option. You can push it into a socket, which I'll show you shortly. So it's got that very simple 8-pin structure, but if you look at them side by side, you can quickly see here that they're actually quite different in size. The V5i absolutely towers over the smaller Muses 02. And that's one of the challenges I mentioned before, and I'll show you an example of it shortly. Essentially, the V5i will drop into any spot where you could use a traditional Muses 02, OPA 627, a lot of the common op amps that are on the market. However, it does have a couple of little intricacies which we'll talk about in a second. Now, for the sake of this review, I'm using the E12 DIY amplifier from Feo, and what I've shown you here is the socket that's designed to have the op amp slotted into it. So I can either slot in a little op amp like this, which is the surface mount OPA 627, and you'll notice that it's on an adapter with the 8 pins there, or I can slot in something like the Muses 02, just there, once again with the 8 pins. Now this amplifier was designed specifically to house the smaller style op amp, so it will fit normally only the surface mount op amps on adapters, meaning that it ends up looking something like this once it's installed. So you can imagine the challenge trying to fit an op amp as big as the V5i into a space like this. The simple fact of the matter is it's not possible. Its size is just prohibitive in some circumstances, mostly for portable amps. In desktop amps you should have plenty of space, but you can forget about using it for portables. So you can see here this ludicrous looking setup that I've got is what I've used to test it. Clearly it's not functional outside of sitting on a desk and not being moved, but it does the job beautifully for testing, and it's allowed me to hear just how impressive the V5i is. So let's talk a bit more about why it's so impressive, and also the other challenge that I came across when using the V5i. So what makes the V5i sound so special is its mid-range. It's got this really unique mid-range. It's right in your face, but I don't mean that in a bad way. It's not congested or crowded. It is intimate though. It's right there, and all of the details are really up front. They're clear, they're delivered to you in a way that you can just pick apart the music in quite a spectacular way. It does mean that there's a slight cost to the treble and bass, not in that they're not well balanced and well presented. Nothing feels like it's lacking. The bass is really punchy, the treble's still really detailed and clear, but the mid-range is just where the focus is. It's like a spotlight's being shone on that, and everything else is still well lit, if you like, but not in the spotlight. So this is very much a mid-range lover's op amp. If you're into mid-range, if you love your vocals and your instrumentals, that's where the V5i is really going to shine, as well as detail retrieval. It has this ability to kind of etch the details, not in a harsh way, but in a way that brings them forward, allows you to really enjoy them and hear every bit of detail and texture that there is to hear. As I've already mentioned, I've got a couple of favourite op amps. The OPA 627 has long been my all-time favourite. Also the Muses 02 is exceptional. So when comparing the V5i or trying to get a handle on how it sounds, I put it up against those two. They're my benchmark op amps. And I can tell you that all three are different, but I'd put all three on exactly the same level. That's how good the V5i is. The Muses 02 presents probably the most neutral sound of all of them. It's very flat across the bass, the mid-range and the treble, but beautifully detailed, beautifully expressive. It's a really enjoyable op amp. The OPA 627 on the other hand is more like the V5i in that it's quite mid-range oriented. It doesn't go quite as far as the V5i though. It's a little bit more restrained in its forcing of the detail at you. It's still very intimate, it's still very controlled and precise, but it's just a little bit more gentle than the V5i. Ultimately, I probably slightly prefer the OPA 627, but the V5i is engaging, it's fun, it's going to let you hear music in ways you haven't heard before. And that to me is worth occasionally plugging it in just for the fun of it. It's really enjoyable and great to listen to. I can particularly imagine the V5i being really valuable in systems that currently lack a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of punch. My system's been built on warm headphones, warm amplifiers. Everything's about musicality for me. I like to hear the music as if I was in a bar with a live performance. And so for me, adding the V5i takes it just a little bit too far because everything else in my system is already doing that for me. But if you had a system, whether it's with speakers or with headphones, and you're looking for that little bit of extra dynamic, that little bit of extra presence, feeling, soul, if you like, the V5i would be a really good option to give you that extra bit of punch, that extra bit of soul and engagement in the music that you might be looking for. Now there's one final thing I want to mention about the V5i, and that is you do need to be careful what systems you plug it into. On the Burson Audio website, it lists a whole lot of op amps that the V5i is a direct replacement for, and it's true. It'll fit into the same socket, it'll work the same way to the most part. One thing you do need to be aware of is if you are using a system that is in any way unusual, and in my case it was the fact that I was using a buffer chip. Now the buffer chip is the piece that goes between the amplification and the headphone, so it's the go-between. The system I was using at the time had an unusual buffer chip which is an Intersil HA5002. Don't worry if you haven't heard about it, all you need to know is that it wasn't one of the standard chips. In fact, it even needed a special adapter in order to adjust the way the pins from the chip connected to the amplifier itself. So it was clearly not standard. And sadly, the buffer chip went up in smoke, literally, when trying to use it with the V5i. So I learned a bit of a lesson there. The lesson is, make sure if you've got anything unusual about your setup, or if you are in any way uncertain about your setup, contact Burson Audio before you purchase and install the V5i. Don't be scared off by it. If you're interested in the V5i, do buy one, do give it a go. It's a fantastic op amp, but just make sure you check with the technical guys at Burson before you go plugging it in, because it could cause you some damage if anything's non-standard and unusual in your system. The technical support from Burson that I've experienced has been excellent. They know what they're talking about. They explain it really clearly what had gone wrong. And so I have no hard feelings to them. That was entirely my error. I should have checked that before I actually went and used it, but it's worth me then sharing this warning with you guys to go and check on that before you plug anything in. So to summarize, the V5i will set you back around about $60 US, which puts it on par with the other op amps I've talked about, the OPA 627 and the Muses 02. Give or take, depending on where you buy them and when you buy them, they're going to be roughly the same price. And at that price, I can say that it's a really recommendable op amp. It's great sounding, really fun, really engaging. It's absolutely top tier audio quality, so I highly recommend it. Just remember to check before you install it that your system is either a pretty standard setup that's just going to be a plug and play replacement, or check with Burson before you actually go ahead and do anything. But I highly recommend you give it a look, especially if you've got a system that needs a bit of extra punch and dynamics and soul. It's a really great sound. If you've enjoyed this review, please make a point of giving us a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see future reviews. I've got some great content coming with the Meta Audio 99 Neo headphones. I've got the Biodynamic Eventho wireless headphones coming up, so there's plenty of really good content. Make sure you subscribe so you get notifications as soon as I have a chance to post the videos. Thanks for watching and happy listening.